Welcome, everyone. I, Councilmember Tola Martz, call the Tuesday, May 28th special session of the Council Services, Safety, and Parks Committee meeting to order. This is a special session pursuant to RCW 42.30.080. There are multiple public comment opportunities at tonight's meeting. There is a general public comment opportunity at the beginning of the meeting, or you can make comments after the presentation and council question and answer period on tonight's agenda items. Members of the public may address council at this time in person or virtually. Those who signed up in advance to make comments will be called on first. If you are joining us virtually and would like to make comments, please raise your virtual hand. If you're on the phone, press *3. If you've joined by computer or smartphone, look for a hand icon. This varies by device. One option may be to go to the participant panel and choose the raise hand icon in the lower right-hand corner. If you're in the room and did not sign up, I will ask for other speakers before closing this portion of the meeting. I will wait for a moment to see if anyone wishes to raise their hand. Clerk Geezer, has anyone signed up to speak or indicated a desire to speak this evening?
No one has signed up to speak. We do have one member of the public with us virtually, but I don't see that they're indicating a desire to speak at this time. Alrighty.
As a reminder, written comments can be submitted at any time to citycouncil@issaquah.gov. With that, we will move on to approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to adopt the minutes of March 19th, 2024.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. With that, we will move on to COM 0041, Court and Criminal Justice Services, presented by our own Wally Bobkowitz, Judge Scott Stewart, and Lynn Moberly, City Prosecutor, and Whitney Gardner, Public Defender. White, the August Group.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good evening. We're here tonight to talk about a topic that we don't often talk about here before the council, but as you will hear this evening, a topic that is of great importance currently and will certainly require the council's careful deliberations as you approach the 25-26 budget process. So I'm not sure who has the PowerPoint. A couple slides before I get over to Judge Stewart. Yeah, we need to. Oh. Next slide. So we're here this evening to provide an informational update on the court and our criminal justice services. As Chair Martz has indicated, we have several guests with us this evening. Next slide, Judge. What we're asking this evening of the committee is to obtain your direction on further information and analysis needed to consider budget increases for the court and the criminal justice services during the 2025-2026 biennial budget. As you know, the court staff is our city employees, and so when we talk about resources there, we're talking about full-time equivalent resources at the court for the city prosecutor, public defender. Those are all contracts. And as we are looking, and as you will hear this evening, we are looking at a great likelihood of additional resources. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Judge Stewart, who's going to give you a brief overview of the court, and the other speakers will follow.
I'm not sure your microphone is on.
Again, my name is Scott Stewart. This is something we deal with during the court during the day, too. I am the Issaquah Municipal Court Judge. I'm here with Christine Shorn, the state's sitting Court Manager of the Year, which just happens to be our Issaquah and recent recipient of a new award, I think, which got passed around. I appreciate all the recognition for that. First of all, giving you a brief overview of the down button. There we go. Of the Issaquah Municipal Court. This is the way we view our organizational chart. At the top of the chart are the residents of Issaquah, and then our contract cities, Snoqualmie, North Bend, and Duval. I would put Christy and I sitting next to each other because she runs that side and I run this side. Beneath that, we have two separate branches of the court, court operations. That's led by our lead judicial specialist, Nikki Meister, who is here. Julia Pilon is here also. She's one of our judicial specialists. Georgia Daphne is not here. She's another judicial specialist, and we have a part-time, we call her a judicial assistant. She's not a judicial specialist. She does most everything that happens on that side of the court, whereas Julia and Nikki and Georgia will also help in court. And we're going to talk about Kathy Koski's role as part of today's presentation. On the other side of court operations is court services. Court services is led by, well, not led by, but made up of Melanie Vanek. She's our probation officer. Ms. Vanek was actually the last employee that we had added as part of our request. It was in 2012, so it's been about 12 years. And Ms. Vanek wasn't added to assist with what we do as far as managing the cases. Ms. Vanek was added to serve a new role to monitor our clientele. Right now, Ms. Vanek has a total caseload of 141 cases, which is big. In addition, folks aren't necessarily aware of it. She has 40 people on random UAs. All of the training that we go to says that one of the best ways to try to address addiction is UAs. Not necessarily just to hold folks accountable, but to know that so that they know they're being held accountable, that they're being watched. The more frequent you can do the UAs, the conference that we went to this week actually said that it should be no less than twice a week, which there's no court in the state of Washington that does twice a week. But we do what we do. We make them random to the extent we can so folks don't know when they're coming, but they're nowhere near that because they're very expensive. So she has 140 cases, 141 active cases right now, 40 cases on random UA. Then we have Marisol Visser. Marisol is here. She's in the back row. She's funded completely by a state grant. Marisol's in charge of our community court. If you were to come to our community court now, I know, for instance, Councilmember DiMichelle has been to a community court and watched. Marisol now actually running the community court meetings to the extent she's calling the calendars. Then we all kind of weigh in with regard to the community court folks. But her job is much more hands-on with a very small percentage of the population. So she's meeting with community court participants on a weekly basis and then is able to let us all know what's going on in a staffing and then the court date. That's what the court's made up of. We've discussed this in prior council meetings. We cover these 5 primary areas: parking infractions, photo enforcement infractions.
I'm sorry, Judge, we have a question.
Judge Stewart, just briefly, I also see a distinguished member of the bar in the back. Could you introduce him as well?
I don't remember. Yeah, this is Sean McCauley, and I'm wearing a tie because I was told Mr. McCauley would be in a suit today, and I wanted to measure up. So I didn't recognize him without a suit on, but this is Sean McCauley. Sean McCauley is with the law firm that on the first page, Whitney Gardner was identified. I was actually at the conference with Whitney Gardner. It was clear towards the end of the conference she was getting sick. She emailed us this morning and said she was tremendously ill. Despite that, she showed up on our calendars today just because we needed her to help with the cases. But Sean has graciously traveled from distances far to fill in for Whitney today and assist with the case. And we also have Alexa McBaron and Lynn Moberly here. I'll tell you right out, this is a simple aside. When we knew that Ms. Moberly's daughter was going to graduate from law school, we knew that we were going to get her. We were terrified because who knows what it's going to be. We're going to get them regardless. Alexa's this bright and sharp and smart as prosecutor wants. So we're very lucky. I was thrilled. And then they hired Russell Thorham, and I was getting a prosecutor from Texas, and I was panicking, prosecutor from Texas. And so it turns out Russell's a great guy too. So we're doing very well, both in our prosecutors and our public defenders. Issaquah is very lucky with that. So here's our court. These are the charges that we get: parking infractions, photo enforcement, both photo enforcement and non-photo enforcement infractions. That's a significant percentage of the filings in the court, not a significant percentage of the work. Frankly, it's a significant percentage of the work that someone like Julia does. But most of what goes on in court has to do with criminal cases. Those are the misdemeanors and the gross misdemeanors. We'll talk about those more in just a second. Court's been working very hard on access to justice. This kind of cute slide was created. Starting here, online portal. We've gone heavily into online. You can access any number of things from our website. People that get traffic tickets can start the whole process and go through the whole process on the website. Then they can zoom in for their hearing if they request a hearing. But everything can be handled on the website. Jurors. I know that Mr. Joe, for instance, has done jury trials and he get those printouts where the juries would fill out the forms. That's all done on the website, and then it's provided to the parties when we get there. So we're heavily invested in the technology through our online portal. Next, hybrid courtroom. I bragged about this before. Issaquah Municipal Court, largely because we have Christy, and she's really good on technology. We were one of the first courts in the state to go into Zoom. We were up and running within a month of COVID, and then as COVID kind of came to the end, Zoom became a very useful tool. And I remember Whitney, my public defender, who's very active in the community, was very concerned that some of her clients that were marginalized might have difficulty with Zoom, and it wasn't fair to them. But we found out that it was much easier to Zoom in than it was to get it to court. So that's had two issues. One is it means we have way few FTAs, which is failures to appear. When attorneys look back pre-COVID, calendars were set based upon an assumption that there would be a 30 to 40% FTA rate, so the calendars would be a certain size, and the FTA rate's like 5 to 10%, 5% on average, but maybe 10%. Everybody shows up for court now because they can show up by Zoom, which makes for longer calendars, and Zoom also moves a little bit slower, but I think it also has a lot of benefits. And we do both. We have the courtroom open, but we're also Zooming in from outside. Interpreter access program, a significant percentage of the folks that we deal with, either English as a second language or no English, and those folks under the law are entitled to interpreters. The good news is that we get significant state funding for interpreters. The bad news is it's not enough. We're constantly looking for more. Christy's on top of all those things to make sure that we're included whenever state funding becomes available, but that's just something you should be aware of with regard to costs. There's a new statewide case management system. We've been on what's called Discus or JIS, I don't know, depends on who you want to call it, but it's been since the early 1990s. The entire state's been run by the same computer program since the early 1990s. For the past over a decade, the state's been trying to develop a new computer program. They've adopted one now. They're coming in phases. What happened about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we are an O-Court court, and O-Court is an online system for creating forms where Ms. Moberly can be at her office, Zooming in, and Mr. McCauley can be at his office Zooming in, and we all have access to the same forms. And we can be creating the forms during court, and it's very, very efficient. Every court that has an opportunity to get it jumps all over it, but the state wasn't in tune with O-Court when they developed the new case management system. So we showed up, we showed up kind of in blindsided the Chief Justice because we were at a meeting that he has with all the judges, and the O-Court folks jumped in and said, we need to protect this, and got everybody on board. And so now O-Court is part of the case management solution, I guess, but we're in the last phase of that because they have to work O-Court into it. So we'll be coming in, but we'll be in the last phase as far as that goes. The one thing I'd point out, when the new case management systems come, that's going to be a hard hit. I mean, that's going to take a lot of man hours to switch from the present system over to the new system, and it's going to slow us down at least for a short period. We've gone entirely to electronic records. If you go pre-COVID, I came out with a basket full of files and a large set of papers next to me for the dockets that I would go through. Everything's online now. My staff's been able to convert all of our old files to online files. It's all in SharePoint, and I'm able to access it from our standard system. Alcohol and drug testing program, same thing as I said earlier, that's a very important part of what we do. We have recently kind of migrated from UAs to mouth swabs just because of the nature of UAs and the difficulty associated with UAs. Mouth swabs are going to have some issues. We probably will maintain a limited number of UAs up front, but it's very expensive. Hopefully the state will continue to pay a significant portion, but in order to protect the community, in order to try to help people beat addiction, UAs are an important part of the process. We do have a community therapy court. That's our community court. I know some of you folks have come over and watched some of that. Those take place on Thursday afternoons. I guess I can go to the next slide. Well, actually, I'll come back to it. I'll come back to that because that's the next slide. And finally, we have a care corner. I don't know if you've looked into this little room back here, but we started to recognize that a significant percentage of the folks, especially the ones we see at court, that are homeless or otherwise marginalized, would come in, would be hungry, wouldn't have appropriate clothes. So we get donations and such. We recently were able to provide a gentleman with shoes so that he could wear them to a job interview. And that's kind of what our goal is. Our goal is to try to help these folks become productive members of the community so they're not breaking the law anymore. So we have a community care corner there. I heard Lynn when she walked in today, she says, I've got something for the community care corner. And then we're all kind of donated as we go along. So that's one thing we got going. The community court goal is to reduce recidivism rates. Apparently that's a hard word for me. Reduce the use of the jail as a sanction for low-level offenses, improve public trust in the justice system, create a safer community, and essentially look forward to participants thriving and living productive, law-abiding lives. Our community court started out small. That's the way we wanted it to start out, and it's grown exponentially. In the first probably year, we would have 3 to 4 people on a community court calendar. They were very time intensive, and they were kind of selective about who we let in. Thursday's community court calendar, we have 19 people on, which is huge for us when you think some of our review calendars tomorrow has 50 people on it, but those are pretty quick. They're relatively quick, at least compared to the amount of time that goes into a community court calendar. So far, it's been, I think, pretty effective. Again, it occurs Thursdays. If you look at the notes that we've put down here, 100% funded by the state right now. Funding awarded in the fiscal year 2024 was $253,585. We believe that funding is going to continue to be awarded. The state's very big on community courts. As I indicated, 3 of us just got back from a community court, or drug court, community court conference in Anaheim. We learned a lot of new tools. It's one of the directions I think that the court system's going as we try to conquer some of these issues, especially with regard to fentanyl and the like. This is just put up here, if you were to go to the Issaquah Municipal Court website, this is our dashboard for the community court. Number of participants, 47, graduates, 17. Our community court resource room, essentially when you show up for community court, we have 2 parts of it. At 12:15, you show up and you can access the resource room, and the resource room is an online portal where you can talk to DSHS and get signed up for whatever resources you need. The main one we're looking for as a general rule is health insurance, so we can get them into alcohol drug treatment, but there might be a job training, resume writing, any number of things that are available from the resource room. Once we get an individual that's got the resources that they need, then they can actually get involved in the community court and become part of the program. It starts at 1:15. And they're coming back every week. Sometimes we stretch out to once every 2 weeks, which we use as a reward for their good participation. But they're coming back every week until we're comfortable that they've hit that point. But all those numbers can be accessed from our dashboard. This website's, this slide is meant to give you an idea of what's happened with the court as far as being busy. 2015, well, the main thing you draw this website is between 2015 and 2023, we've seen a 44% increase in case filings. So the court's case filings have gone up by 44%, 11% since 2019. You do see a dip. The next slide is meant to show the exact same. You see a dip there in 2019, 2020, and 2021. It's starting to grow again. Yes.
I'm sorry, Judge. Deputy Council President?
Oh, I hope this is a good place to ask this question.
You bet.
On the state has said that we're going to vacate all the marijuana-related convictions.
Right.
Is that reflected in the numbers that we see there? I mean, I didn't see it reflected there. Is that an extra task that's being taken
We
on?
have vacated.
They're all done?
As a court, the state made funds available because when you vacate them, you got to pay them back.
Oh.
And so we had calendars. There's a lot of work involved in that, but essentially the city, because it's a city case, the city identified the appropriate cases to vacate and dismiss. Move to vacate and dismiss. We then had to go through each of the dockets, confirm who paid fines. They were then all invited to come to court, and the ones that did show up for court, we dismissed the case and we refunded any monies that they paid. That refund is then paid ultimately by the state because the state created a fund to pay back folks. One of our goals, I think, was to make sure that we got that money when it was still available. Mm-hmm. But with regard to how, I didn't do the numbers, so how would the mayor want to go ahead?
So,
Please go to the microphone.
sorry,
Thanks.
Chrissy Shorn, Municipal Court. So we vacated a total of 426 charges. 186 of those were Issaquah alone. We refunded just over about $23,500 in fines so far. And then we've expenses to process those were about $68,000. So a total of about $91,000 so far, and that's all been reimbursed from the state.
Well, thank you. So it's basically done. We've done the job. Okay.
We have. Who we haven't refunded is we haven't refunded the folks that didn't appear. Because what we didn't, that money's still available if they appear and ask for it, but the concern was that you'd be sending checks out to addresses that you didn't even know if they existed. So I'm correct on that, correct?
Correct. And so we have vacated everything since this court was established in 2005. Ms. Moberly's office is currently working on everything filed in King County, and I believe that's another about 400 cases for all 3 cities.
Thank you so much.
Showing that we're ahead of King County. This slide shows the total criminal filings by jurisdiction, and it shows change between 2019 and 2023. And this is just talking about criminal cases. If you look at 2019, Issaquah was 628. Snoqualmie and North Bend were another 874 cases. So Issaquah fell behind. Not that that's a bad thing, but Issaquah had less filings. In 2023, Issaquah's filings are up significantly as a comparison to the numbers from the other 2 cities. And the red one at the top is Duval. Duval joined us in 2022, so that's why you don't see Duval prior to that. One of the things that's important to keep in mind, and I think this is just a result of policing, and it's true across jurisdictions throughout the state, is DUIs between 2019 and 2023 are up 133% in the city of Issaquah. Non-traffic criminal charges, which is where you get your thefts and your domestic violence charges, are up 27%. Traffic, non-DUI criminal convictions down 79%. That's almost exclusively talking about driving with license suspended in the 3rd degree. That used to be the most common crime that got charged in the state of Washington, and it's simply not being filed at the same rates as it was before. I think that's a decision that's being made by both prosecutors and law enforcement as far as the way they treat those charges, and the emphasis has been placed on the more serious charges. Now, the issue with that is not only are our numbers up, when you look at our numbers being up, our numbers are up with DUIs, domestic violence, and theft charges, as compared to in the past when your numbers were up by, when 70% of your work was driving with license suspended in the 3rd degree, and a driving with license suspended in the 3rd degree, we call it discovery, but the information provided to the police department might be 3 sentences long. Now it's DUIs, which are multiple page reports with requests from the toxicologist, much more complex. So we have more cases and they're more complex cases, and that's just a product of where the enforcement's going, and the enforcement's concentrating on the more serious cases, which I think is where it should be focused, but it does create more work for the court. This slide shows you, and this slide is wrong. For somehow 2015 didn't make it to the slide, so this says 2015. 2015 should be 2016, and then it works its way over. The one that's 2022 should be 2023. 2015 we had 4,902 criminal filings, 1,764 infractions, and in 2023, the most recent, we have 5,990, not filings, I'm sorry, these are hearings. So we had 4,902 hearings in 2015. We had a little over 1,000 more hearings in 2023, and that's based upon the nature of the charges we have. So there's been a 29% increase in the number of court hearings that we have, just based upon the way things are filed into the court. And this is part of our pitch, at least from the court perspective. We did a study to show the FTE in some of the local courts. There were, no court's the same, but this is a comparison. Issaquah had 15,274 filings in 2023. We have 6.4 staff people. That's 6 full-time people, and 0.4 is what our judicial assistant is, which means we have an average of 2,107 FTE per filing. Des Moines is the closest to us. They have 17,519, same number of judges. They have 2.6 more staff than we have, for 1,779 FTE number of filings per full-time employee. Then you go up down to Bothell, 1,599. Then you get into some of the bigger cities, 691, 511, and down at the bottom you have SeaTac, Edmonds, and Tukwila, which, if you look at, they have 7 times as many staff member per filing as we have in the city of Issaquah. So my staff's working real hard. They're good people. I'm thrilled to have each of them, but they're working real hard, and that's part of the reason that we were here asking for additional staffing with regard to our court staff. And these are some of the things that we're looking at. We'd like to promote Kathy Koski, our judicial assistant, to a judicial specialist. That would allow her to be trained in court. She moved full-time. That'd be an increase of $100,000 annually. because of the benefits and such that she pick up when that was to happen. We would love to be able to increase our current alcohol drug testing, budget in response to fentanyl crisis, and increase in DUI filings. So there's more fentanyl that we're dealing with. Fentanyl was something we didn't deal with at all prior to 2010. Fentanyl was something we didn't deal with at all until 2018. Heroin was 2010, and we thought that was bad. We're looking for an additional $10,000. Of course, we're going to try to get whatever we can from the state, but we'd like to be able to do better with our alcohol drug monitoring. There's going to be, we anticipate an additional $13,000 annually with regard to interpreter costs, just based upon the way things are going. Again, we'd be looking to the state to the extent we can, but that's money that we need. Additional contract security to provide additional coverage for trial settings, probation appointments. Of course, if the court moves to King County, we would lose our court security, which we will be, we recognize that we need to move somewhere, but we love our court security. He's been tremendously helpful. UAs are one of the worst, when part of your job is to order somebody, watch somebody urinate, and he's willing to fill in for that for the male folks and stuff like that. He's just been very, very handy and very good guy. So we'll be very sad if and when that happens. And finally, if the photo enforcement goes through, our understanding is that the council has considered additional photo enforcement. Photo enforcement is not as much judge-intensive time as it is staff-intensive time. And based upon what we understand that they're looking at for photo enforcement, we'd be looking for one more full-time employee. That would still, I think, keep our numbers below the average for the area as far as full-time employees for filing, but we would need that employee for the photo enforcement. That being said, my understanding is the statute's written in such a fashion that part of that money would come from the photo enforcement itself, or all of the money would come. It would be self-paid, at least using some of the funds from that. With that, I have the honor of introducing Ms. Moberly.
Question?
Yes, any other questions you got? I should ask that.
Thank you, Judge Stewart. Appreciate all the information tonight. When the court first started, we were primarily just doing Issaquah cases. We added Snoqualmie, North Bend, and Duval. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the additional staff might help us with our ultimate goal that we've been talking about, excuse me, of being kind of a East Side regional court. We have the jail, we have the facilities here. If the court expands, does that help us become more of a East Side center for court services and jail services?
Christy says yes. I mean, I can tell you that I try not to get too involved in some of these things, but there have been multiple cities that have approached us. The present facility is not as conducive to court as at one point we had someone that was contracting that was coming in for something completely unrelated to our ability to provide court services, and that person was contacted by one of the cities who were considering coming here. Just said we didn't have the resources, and we disagreed with that. I mean, I think we could have handled it, but we don't have a real jury room. We don't have a holding cell. We don't have spaces for the attorneys necessarily to meet with clients at the courtroom. Those are things that I think they look for just as far as space and stuff like that. But ultimately, the court has a pretty good reputation. If I actually was on the website, I was Googling it. I get into Google and such. And just some of the comments that folks have as far as the customer service they get from our staff and stuff like that. That's what most cities are looking for, and I don't think they necessarily get that from their present provider. So obviously, if we were to grow, we would need more staff, and that staff would allow us to do that.
Great. If I could just follow quickly. So if I'm hearing you correctly, if we want to move on and grow to be more of a regional center for court services, we need to have a pretty serious conversation about the new home for the court after the transition, or temporary home at district court that might be happening in the near future. And I can think of no one better to be part of that conversation than you and your staff, and I hope that you'll be very involved in trying to find a facility that will allow us to provide the great court services that we already have, but to also think about the future and becoming more of a regional hub for court services.
Sure, and I would encourage you to include the public defender and the prosecutor in that, just because they know the needs of the, and I recognize private defense counsel are involved, but public defenders handle such a high percentage of the cases that they would know more of their needs probably than I would.
Absolutely,
There's that
thank
as
you.
well.
That's my oversight for not including them. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Deputy Council President DiMichele?
So Judge Stewart, with regard to the fentanyl crisis, are there additional services that we could provide or that are needed beyond just drug testing?
Well,
I know it's a very complex
If
issue.
Ms. Gardner was here, she'd be coming out of her chair right now, and she'd be saying, we need, but I think it's beyond anything that the council can do to, we don't have any treatment facilities in Issaquah, other than Friends of Youth. But Friends of Youth is a great treatment facility, but it's Friends of Youth.
Right.
And so it's a very small percentage of the population. We heavily use Raging River, which is a treatment facility that is through Apple Healthcare, so it helps some of the lower income folks who are less mobile and therefore need to use a local one. So treatment facilities are huge. And, you know, there's an online element of treatment now where a lot of folks are able to do it online. I don't know how effective that is. So the more we can get the treatment facilities in folks' neighborhood, the more effective I think the treatment's going to be. What the UAs allow us to do is the UAs allow us to know where the person is with regard to their recovery. Because shock, people that use fentanyl aren't necessarily going to be honest with us or even honest with themselves. And so we need to track that. Likewise with all the drugs, but the main ones we're dealing with now are fentanyl and alcohol. Every once in a while, I think we get a methamphetamine, but it's pretty rare. It's fentanyl and alcohol. And alcohol obviously creates danger. Fentanyl creates danger, but fentanyl also creates death. And so those are things that we're on top of. And Ms. Gardner, when she's in court, points out, I think that she's at something around 50 people during COVID that she's dealt with as clients that have died of fentanyl. That's a huge number when you look at our population that we deal with. So the more, and drug testing isn't just a matter of being able to afford, but what's the cost on a is it $35? I could share with you right now, you know, how often we're able to drug test, but you don't want me to because it becomes part of a public record. And the folks that are on drug testing, they're on random drug testing. They call in every day, and they don't know when their number's going to come up. The problem is the cost associated with the personnel that have to do the drug testing and the cost of the drug testing themselves. So there's the way both the swabs and the UAs work is if it's negative, there's an instant that comes back and tells us it's negative. If it's negative, we can stop right there, okay? If it's positive, we have to send it in for confirmation because there's false positives that occur. False negatives don't really occur, false positives do. There's a cost of the person that's giving the test. There's a cost for the strip or either the urine cup and measuring device or the swab that's going in the mouth. And then if we have to send it in, there's even an added cost of sending it in. And so those are all costs that are involved in that. And like I said, the standard, which I didn't know until Anaheim this past week, is twice a week. Nobody's doing that. Most folks aren't doing once a week. You just don't have the resources to. So you make them random so the folks that are using know that on any day they could be tested. But the better the testing is, the more frequent the testing is, the better the success rate. So at least that's what I'm taught.
You know, I'm really involved with drug prevention.
I know that.
And so this part of your presentation is really meaningful to me. And I take it to heart that we need treatment centers in Issaquah. Even in the prevention arena, we know that and we understand that. And I really appreciate your remarks.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions at all?
Yeah, I have a few. Can you go back to the community court program overview where you talk about the goals, please?
Get up. Let's see if it goes. There it went. There you go.
There we go. So how do we know that we're impacting those goals with the program thus far?
Well, it's relatively anecdotal right now. We are aware of, we've had 17 graduates. We've had two cases of recidivism that we know of out of the 17, which is significantly better than the average. One of the cases where we had recidivism, and I think that, I don't know that Mr. McCauley would be familiar with this person, but I think that my prosecutors would. While that person reoffended, that person had things going on that I don't think, we were relatively new, things going on that we weren't completely aware of. And just in the correspondence with his mom, to be frank with you, about the impact that community court had him, he's doing tremendously well right now. He had one issue, but from that issue, he went into inpatient treatment. And he zooms in now frequently to our community court just to participate for fun. He's the only one that does it. And his mom has sent us letters saying his entire perspective on the world changed just because of the impact that the community court had on him. So while that counts as a recidivism, I still count that as a win. Other than that, it's really anecdotal just because there's only been 17 graduates. But I think that we all think it's been pretty effective. I mean, the problem with the community court is we all went to the training in the state, this Washington Drug Professionals training. And to really get into the weeds, most of the community courts would like to see ultimately you accept folks into your program that are the most difficult folks. And we're still small and learning. In Snohomish County, one of the Superior Court judges up there was saying that they had this tremendous success rate because the prosecutors were only referring first-time offenders. And if you only refer first-time offenders, those could be your success stories. Whereas the ones that were 7th and 8th time offenders might be the ones that you might be wanting to target a little bit more. Now, we're not a drug court, but I think that there's a possibility that our community court, when our community court started, I think we were heavily looking at, you've got your recent high school graduate that picks up a theft charge, and he doesn't have anything indicating he's got an alcohol or drug problem, no mental health problems. It's just a one-off. Somebody that would have gotten a deferral anyway but needs resources, you bring that person to the community court, get them the resources they need. There's no real treatment involved, but to get some job training or whatever, and then the case is dismissed and they move on and we never see them again. On the flip side, what we're going to, I think, start seeing is all those drug charges that are now being filed as misdemeanors are going to be higher need population. And drug courts and stuff are looking at high risk, high needs, which means people that are likely to reoffend and people that are truly in need of resources. And I think we're going to start seeing more of those come in. And that's going to be harder to measure because there's a likelihood that the recidivism rate in that group is going to be higher because it's just the population that you're dealing with. But where the successes occur, their successes are a pretty big deal because you're changing people's lives and you're getting somebody that was committing crimes off the street. So we'll see where that goes. So.
Thank you. Next question I have is you mentioned, and I saw on a couple of slides, DUI being up 130%. Did you say domestic violence was also?
Not by that large amount,
But it's
more
up considerably. Did you have a slide that showed both of those?
I don't think we've broken them out by DV.
Okay.
DV and theft we just know is up. It's part of that 27%.
So my question is on both DUI and DV, does the council have policy and legal options to address those increased crime rates? Like, for instance, could we make DUI punishable by 364 days in jail?
It is punishable by 364 days in jail. Yeah. I don't think that Chief Schwab would know better than I suspect that DUI isn't necessarily up. I suspect it's just a matter of policing. Just the police are doing a better job catching the guys. I mean, and emphasizing in certain areas. And I think that same is true for DV. I mean, they're all punishable by 364 days in jail and a $5,000 fine. They used to be punishable by 365, and they had to change it to 364 because people were getting in trouble for gross misdemeanors on a federal level that they weren't for felonies. There's a thing called DUI court. We don't have a DUI court at this point in time. That's for third offense DWIs. Most courts take third offense or more, where it's a very intensive treatment program. We only have so much space and so much time. But if I can see a possibility that the DUIs continue to rise and we make a determination that the significant percentage of them are a multiple time offender. We had a guy on today, I think, with 7 DUIs. I mean, when you get into those kind of numbers, you start to look at other options you might have to make the world a better place, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. So, yeah, I mean.
Okay. I recognize it's a complicated problem. I know that we did I can't remember what it was for, but we did municipal, maybe it wasn't domestic violence, and this was a while ago. This was 7 or 8 years ago. Councilmember Scheer had an idea, and we enacted some multipliers on some, maybe it was
domestic violence crimes committed in the presence of children.
It was DV. Okay.
I think that what that becomes largely, heavily, not always, but it becomes a huge tool for the prosecutor, because if a domestic violence event is committed in front of a child, and the guy's I shouldn't say guy, but the defendant is wanting to go to trial and stuff, the prosecutor has a tool that says, plead guilty and I'll dump this charge, because if they're convicted of that charge, it's mandatory 30 days in jail. So you get that mandatory 30 days under those circumstances. I think that Issaquah and Federal Way both have that particular charge, where I've seen it before.
Good. I have one last question. Can you go to the slide? You added Duval, it's Snoqualmie, North Bend, Issaquah. It's a chart that you've got. It's got like 4 vertical bar. Just don't remember where it is.
That one?
No, there. Nope. Keep going. Sorry. Well, actually, maybe. Nope. I'm sorry. You're right. It was that one. Okay. So why, as I look at the most recent years, as I look at 2021, 22, 2023, it's like North Bend's getting better, Snoqualmie's getting better, Issaquah's getting worse. Why? I mean, they have, one would think they have comparable populations to ours. Why?
I don't think I characterize it as Issaquah getting worse. I think I characterize it as Issaquah's policing getting more proactive. I think that's what you're seeing there more than anything else. At least that's what we're seeing. There, and honestly, I don't know how to say this, but there were, Snoqualmie for a period of time had 2 law enforcement officers that were responsible for just a huge percentage of, I didn't sleep at nights because I get calls at 2 o'clock in the morning for search warrants and stuff. And there was one law enforcement officer that's moved to Arizona who literally called me 4 or 5 times a week. And he was replaced by another officer that wasn't quite as aggressive, and they both left the department. One moved to Arizona. I don't know where the other one moved, but 1 or 2 law enforcement officers that are just tremendously aggressive can. One of my law partners used to say law enforcement, creates crime. They don't create crime, but what that means is they're out the proactive law enforcement, and largely with DUIs and such, these guys all know which officers I'm talking about, and I'm not knocking them. You become friends with somebody that wakes you up at 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week, but not really close friends, but and I'm now getting. There was periods of time where I'd go months without getting a call from Issaquah. That's no longer the case. No longer the case at all. Issaquah's doing search warrants, and I'm dealing with that. So I think it's mostly proactive policing.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief Swan may disagree with me, but that's what I'm seeing anyway. So.
All right. Well, thank you. I mean, you just point out how complicated it is taking any one particular statistic and trying to tease out what it means.
Especially when you're dealing with not real small jurisdictions, but a small jurisdiction like North Bend and Snoqualmie, where you've got 1 or 2 officers can just have a huge impact on those numbers.
Sure.
So.
All right. That's all the questions that I had. Before we move on. Oh, Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you go 3 slides forward to the annual filings, staffing comparisons chart that you had there? Okay, thank you. Could you give us a little bit of guidance? Issaquah is not at a full-time judicial officer. What types of things would we need to be looking at in the future that's going to bump that to either 1 or 1.25, where we have to have another person coming in? What types of things should the council be looking at in the future as we think about future staffing, especially at the judicial officer level?
I don't think we're there yet. I think we're fine as we are right now. I think we are more in need of staff than judicial. But
is it driven by filings, or is it driven by administrative oversight that needs to be done outside of the courtroom? What are the
I think it's heavily driven by filings, especially criminal filings.
Okay.
A significant percentage of the civil filings are handled without any involvement by me whatsoever. So just because folks pay the ticket, and then there's another percentage which are what we call MITs by mail. My favorite part of the job, as Julia knows, which I get a stack of folks that have requested a mitigation by mail. I never see the person. I just am going through probably 100 of those a month, just in my downtime. I just fill out MITs by mail. Then every Thursday we have a traffic infraction calendar with a prosecutor. Those are really, the prosecutors have worked with the defense attorneys. Most of those are dispositions, and those go relatively fast. On 2 Thursdays of the month in the afternoon, 1 Thursday of the month in the afternoon, we have a MIT calendar. 70 mitigation hearings, I can handle it in an hour. I mean, and That's a big mitigation calendar. They're just very, very fast. And I kind of enjoy those because I get to be a little bit of a, I mean, you got citizens coming in, so you're trying to make people feel comfortable with the court system. Get very positive comments from the folks because I'm treating them as human beings. And one of the fun things about those calendars is we've set them in after our community court. So those folks will come in and they get to watch the end of the community court and see what we're doing. So you get this positive impact on folks from the community that see some of the things we're doing in community court. So it's kind of cool. More infraction calendars don't create a lot of work for a judge, what I'd say. More criminal filings probably would. So Duval, which created no real additional work for me, we can just plug it in and add it to the other things. And Snoqualmie and North Bend have actually fallen as far as criminal files while Issaquah has gone up. So I'm okay right now where I'm at. I need additional staffing largely because of the infractions and such.
Okay, so we just need to watch the criminal filings, the DVs, the DUIs. If those numbers go up significantly, you may be back.
We'll come tell you, yeah.
Asking for help.
We'll come tell you, or you know, it's not my position to get into how the court grows or, you know, as far as other cities coming in. I know that other cities have expressed interest. Sometimes I think a couple years ago, we got the sense that was kind of to get their present contract to drive their price down. And, but obviously if a big city came in, that would create issues too.
Great,
So.
I appreciate the guidance that council can look at as we're evaluating the future of the court and the entire court system.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that does it for now.
Okay, Ms. Moberly, do you have your slides or you want mine? I don't have any notes on yours. Let me get you there. So I moved this box out of the way and it had an impact on mine. There you are.
Good evening. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, some of the increases that Judge Stewart already talked about, and go from there. My name is Lynn Moberly. I've been the city prosecutor for a long time, over 20 years. I came from the King County Prosecutor's Office where I ran the domestic violence unit for a while, and I specialized in sex crimes for a while, and then I ended my career there being the manager of the Regional Justice Center, that's now the Norm Mailing Regional Justice Center, and decided to kind of cut back a little bit, and for a while there I was working part-time. Those were the good old days. When I had the city of Issaquah and wanted to be a little bit of a mom. But at this point in time, it's full-time, obviously, and then some. I have two wonderful associates. I have Alexa McBaron, who the judge already told you is my wonderful daughter, but she is also an amazing attorney. She's been with me since 2016. When she graduated from University of Washington Law School. Prior to coming to my office, she spent 2 summers with King County Prosecutor's Office as an intern and then a Rule 9 extern where she was actually trying cases. So that was wonderful. So she came with me with significant experience from King County and has continued to grow and just been a godsend. In 2021, I hired Russell Thorham, who, as the judge said, came from Texas. He had 8 years of prosecution work in Texas after leaving his work as a defense attorney. As a prosecutor, he specialized in homicide, mostly, robbery, drug trafficking, and assault. We felt really happy to find Russell because it was a time, and it continues to be a time, when people just don't want to be prosecutors anymore, sadly. In an event, we have over 40 years of criminal prosecution experience between the 3 of us. And I think we're known to be a little bit tough on crime, but with the community court and the role that Alexa's taken, and obviously the court has instilled, we're also known to be fair and understanding of the needs of the defendants. So, the next slide. Ooh, that was supposed to be the first. That's us. Telling you a little bit what we do. Obviously, our office handles all gross misdemeanor and misdemeanor cases that happen within the city limits. We also end up with cases that really aren't misdemeanors or gross misdemeanors because they're felony on the books, but King County filing standards won't file them because their caseload is out of control or whatever reason. They just don't. So they're, for example, a theft in the second degree, a felony, that's a felony. And on the books, it says, if you steal anything over $750, it's a felony. So it should go to King County prosecutors. But their filing standards say we won't take anything under $2,000, and that's pretty much become more like $4,000 to $5,000. We've seen declines that come back to us, file it with the city prosecutor. So we handle, that's true with malicious mischief dollar amounts, forgery dollar amounts, and just a heck of a lot of crimes that they don't have the manpower or won't prosecute. So those cases come to us. So they're really felonies, but they're handled as misdemeanors. So the cases come in, the police investigate the cases, they send them to us. We review the cases, determine what should be charged. Usually the police pick the charge, but sometimes we add charges or we change the charge. We look at what evidence we have. We decide if we can file the case beyond and prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But at that first level, it's do we have probable cause to file the case? And can we convince the judge that we have probable cause? Sometimes we reach back out to the police. We say we need more evidence. You didn't get a statement from that witness, though, or the victim that was not very cooperative. Could we maybe call her back and see if perhaps she or he will be cooperative? We order what else we need. We order the 911 tapes. We might ask officers to go back and get follow-up pictures because a black eye doesn't show as a black eye till a few days later. And we obviously have a wonderful police force that we work with and are very responsive. And we gather everything we need to file that case. Many of those things have to be done within 24 hours because if somebody's arrested, they're going to be seen the next morning for court. Sometimes we have the luxury of having more time if somebody is charged but not arrested and put in jail. So a little more time to gather our evidence and review it. After reviewing it, we prepare the case for filing. As we do, we look at the offender's criminal history, we look at their warrant history, and in that respect, we're determining, will we be asking for bail on this case? Will we be asking for a personal recognizance? What other conditions of release are we going to ask for? Are we going to be asking if somebody's a stalker, do we want to put a GPS on their ankles so the victim knows they're not going to come back to their home? If they're a repeat DUI person, we're going to be asking for possibly a scram bracelet, which they used to call it the Lindsay Lohan bracelet, the bracelet that monitors whether you're drinking. We have wonderful providers that instantly notify us, the prosecutors, if somebody has a confirmed consumption while they're on that, and then we bring them back for a review hearing. We get the case filed, we prepare it for arraignment. Arraignment hearings we handle. That's the first hearing that a defendant comes to where he's formally charged with, or advised what the charge is and formally arraigned. And at that point, oftentimes the public defender gets appointed, or by arraignment or after arraignment, they will decide they're going to hire a public defender, a private attorney. Thank you. The next phase is the negotiation phase. And that's when we're looking at our case even more carefully. We are listening to the 911. We're watching the body cams. We're assessing the case. We are calling witnesses. We're calling victims. We're determining if they're going to be cooperative. Are they going to come in? Have they changed their mind about things? Do they have questions? So it's a very, it's time consuming because we really want to know our case before we're going to give that offer to the defense attorney. And then we negotiate with the defense attorney. We do all of the negotiations in writing. I mean, we do a lot of it by discussion, but it starts out in writing, so they have that. They have it up front. We try to get offers out as early as we can so that the cases don't drag on, and so that they have time to communicate with their clients. And, you know, sometimes there's back and forth, back and forth. We also then make sure, because there's 3 of us, that we have to be very consistent. If one of us makes an offer, we don't want somebody going to another attorney and saying, hey, you know, here's what's going on in this case. No forum shopping. So we are very careful and meticulous about keeping notes in our electronic filing system. We did go from paper to electronic I believe 4 years ago. So we're all electronic now. After the negotiation, it comes down to whether a case is going to get resolved by plea or it's going to go to trial. And sometimes we don't find out that it's going to be a plea till the day of trial. And that can be frustrating because you're all ready to go to jury trial and you're dressed up and the case doesn't go. But most cases do get resolved by plea. I would say probably over 90% resolved by some kind of a plea negotiation, and quite frankly, sometimes cases get dismissed because sometimes we don't have a victim, we don't have a witness, and nobody's going to be cooperative, and we don't have a choice. We usually try to dismiss it without prejudice, especially in domestic violence cases. So if something happened that the offender had possibly gotten her out of state, gotten her away, changed her phone number, but something happens later down the line where they call us and they want to be cooperative, we can refile that case and come back if we have time left on speedy trial, which usually we do. Once the case gets resolved by either a plea or a guilty verdict or a not guilty verdict at trial, if it's guilty, we proceed to sentencing hearings where we make our recommendation, the defense makes their recommendation. Ultimately, Judge Stewart that decides what's the appropriate sentence in a case, given the facts of the case, the criminal history. What are the issues? Does the person need a domestic violence assessment, moral recognition therapy, an alcohol drug evaluation, anger management, no contact orders, mental health treatment? Those are all the kinds of things. We're clearly, even not just in community court, we are a rehabilitative court because we're at the misdemeanor. This is where we're trying to prevent them to going to the next level of felonies. Some of them already have, but at this point, we're still trying to rehabilitate if that person is amenable. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes let's go to jail. I mean, we've got somebody now with probably 14 violations of a no contact order, and the offer now is 1 year in jail. I mean, you just can't learn. Finally, after that, we have to ensure that the judge's sentence is complied with. Otherwise, it's worth nothing. So we have very lengthy, long, monthly review calendars where we have to go carefully through the docket, see how many times somebody's been in for a review hearing before. You know, when you were given an opportunity to do 2 days of electronic home monitoring and now you're back and you haven't done it and you have a positive UA. Is it 10 days in jail or are we going to try to get you inpatient? So the review hearings are long and exhausting. I often go all day long. They're very intense calendars, but there are so many courts, especially, I'm not saying, there are so many courts that simply don't have review calendars. The King County prosecutors don't attend review calendars. We take reviews very seriously, because if you don't monitor your cases, what is all the work for? So, finally, we do legal training and updates to the police department. We currently do that twice a year, and we really enjoy doing it. Sometimes we get a little behind schedule, but we've got them set now for every June and every December. And obviously, we also do, when laws change or a procedure changes, we do memos to the police to say, like when Blake happened, it was a lot of memo writing of this is what the This is what WAPA, Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, is recommending. Every jurisdiction did it a little bit differently until we all came on the same page that all those prior convictions needed to be vacated. And that was clearly a lot of work, but we did it. And we just finished all the old cases that were filed over in King County. So that is essentially what we do on a daily basis. And then the next slide is changes and trends. I would say the biggest change in 2024 is the body cams, the addition of the body cams. We've learned from our paralegal in downloading them to our files to everything from watching them and knowing what's on them, because before we only had the police report and nothing. Now we're there, we're watching it. And sometimes it's time consuming because a DUI from start to finish can literally take 2 or 3 hours. If there's a blood draw and they're going up to the hospital, maybe more. But if you don't watch it, you're going to miss something. So in every case that's going to trial, that entire footage is going to be watched by a prosecutor. If it's a negotiation case, we're going to watch what we need to watch. But it has been quite time consuming. It's been a real change in our jobs. I think a change for the better. It's just time consuming, but it's a great change for our officers to feel safe in what they're doing, and it's the best picture that the jury can see. They're there. In between we already talked about this, 2019 and 2023, the DUI filings have gone up 133% in Issaquah alone. Yes, we have a new police chief, and not new, but and we're seeing great enforcement. I mean, they are out there doing their job, and they're getting these people off the street, and that is what Issaquah needs. Many of those cases hire private counsel. I would say roughly 50% hire private counsel. So it's the public defenders we have are excellent. I would say the private counsel tend to go a little harder on the motion work, which requires research, bringing officers in for motion hearings, writing briefs for every one of those motions, and it's a lot of work. It's satisfying work, but it's a lot of work. In 2020,
I'm sorry, we have a question from
Absolutely.
Deputy Council President Michelle.
Lynn, again on fentanyl, it's a federal crime, right?
I wouldn't see it as a federal crime if it's a DUI fentanyl, which we get a lot of physical control and DUI. That means they're sitting in a non-running car, but with the car running and they're slumped out behind the wheel is the common scenario with fentanyl. If we're seeing that, I don't believe it is a federal crime.
Okay.
If they were across state lines or traveling, it could be, but no. Pardon me? On a military
Okay.
base or something.
My
But
question really was, do you interact a lot with federal prosecutors, but apparently not?
Not so much.
Okay.
Not so much. On mail thefts, we do, because sometimes those are across state lines, and they work together with us to see if they're going to take the case federally, depending on the person's track record, and they've been doing it and crossing state lines, but not in the DUI. But I will say the number of increase in DUIs absolutely has to do with fentanyl.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
When I think of DUI, I think of traditionally alcohol,
Sure.
somebody. At what point do DUI people actually do jail time?
I think, the police department usually books DUIs. So they're definitely going to be in jail till they get seen the next day. Unless there's some reason why they decide, make a determination not to book them. Issaquah police book a lot of DUIs. Most. And if it's a second DUI, it's a mandatory booking. But Issaquah books most of their first DUIs. Later, if they continue to reoffend, not follow probation, we absolutely have had DUIs that have served out their entire year. So they seize, and if it's a second DUI, there's a mandatory minimum of 30 days if they blow, 45 days if it's over a 1.5, 45 blow over a 1.5, 45 days is a mandatory minimum if they refuse to blow. So they're and that's within a 7-year period.
So second DUI, they're going to do at least a month.
At least a month,
Okay.
45 days if they refuse, or it's over 1.5. And even if it's a second DUI in 10 years, it's not a mandatory minimum, but we recommend jail because they've already had a bite at the apple. So yes, we do recommend jail for repeat offenders of DUI.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Other questions right now? Nope.
In 2023, domestic violence cases went up. It now, in 2023, constituted 30% of the criminal caseload, which is a jump from the year before, I believe, when it was 21% of the criminal caseload. So not a huge jump, but definitely a jump. You know, there are cases that are difficult, they're complex, they're emotionally draining. So we have a DV advocate who is wonderful, but we also are interacting with the victims. We need to know our victims. We need to bring them in for interviews. That's a weekly thing happening in our office, DV interviews with victims. They call a lot, they need hand-holding. Some of them want the case dropped immediately, but the other ones want to know, what can we do that's going to help them perhaps stay in a situation that they have to stay in, but get help and resources, and how can they get the resources for their abuser. So that's been a significant increase in work. As you know, in August of 2023, drug possession was back on the books, and the statute was changed, and we all started filing those again. We haven't seen a huge number yet, but we definitely are getting filings for possession and use in a public place, which the maximum sentence is 180 days rather than the 90 that it used to be. So, and then finally, we have the addition of community court since 2021, which obviously the judges touched on, and Alexa's going to talk about it a little bit more because she takes the lead in the community court. Okay, so, and then in reaching out to other King County contract prosecutors, we did some comparisons. I knew Issaquah seemed to be getting a pretty good deal. And when we actually broke it down by filings, I get paid $228 a filing, or my office does, where, boy, Maple Valley prosecutor, a lot more than that. Kenmore prosecutor, a lot more than that. Shoreline prosecutor, a lot more than that. I would point that out in that it's not just case filings that have increased. The number of calendars in 2023 doubled from the number of calendars a month from 2018, doubled. And they are long. They often go through lunch, almost always, and into the evening. I truly believe that the city of Issaquah has the best, most experienced prosecution team in the county and probably the state. It might be biased, but the bottom line is we can't keep serving Issaquah unless we're able to have an increase in compensation, so I can offer health insurance to my employees like the county does, like Bellevue does, like Seattle does, and keep them. So, we love being your prosecutors. I live in Sammamish, but used to be Issaquah. I love the community, and we certainly hope that we will continue to be your prosecutors. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. McBaron briefly to talk a little bit more about community court. And I do have stats and numbers if you're interested. I did look at the total caseload from the 3 cities, Issaquah, Snoqualmie, North Bend. Issaquah was at 60% between the 3 cities, Snoqualmie 15%, North Bend 25%. And yeah, if there's any other questions, please let me know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I am Alexa McBaron, and obviously I work with Lynn at the office along with Russell Thorham. I know the judge touched a lot on community court and what that program looks like and its goals, but I just want to touch on a little bit of kind of the day-to-day and the workload that it looks like for our office. So obviously we started it in 2021, as has been mentioned. For us, the community court potential process starts as soon as we're reviewing new cases that are on for that first arraignment hearing. We're reviewing cases for who would be a potential participant, appropriate participant for our community court. So we're looking at, as the judge mentioned, people to have little to no criminal history, young people that, it's that one-off theft that we're hoping to divert them from the criminal justice system before they're on their way, essentially, as we see sometimes happen. Or we're looking at that high-risk, high-needs population, where we're looking at low-level crimes driven by poverty or addiction, even if they do have lengthy criminal histories, because we're trying to target the population of people that can really benefit from the resources that are in the resource room, whether that's SUD, substance use disorder treatment, mental health treatment, DSHS resources, things like that. To kind of facilitate this process, we have a weekly staffing meeting on Mondays where that's the prosecutor, defense attorney, court staff, the Marisol case manager, and the judge. We all meet on Mondays and discuss everyone that's currently in community court, if people are in compliance, if they're not, how we're going to tackle issues if they're not in compliance, what are their goals for the next week. And then obviously we're prepping for the weekly community court calendar, which again involves confirming compliance, reading treatment reports, confirming negative UAs, reviewing criminal history to make sure people haven't reoffended, and reviewing, observing participants to target what kind of needs we think that they will need to be able to successfully opt into our program. And then we have the weekly community court calendar, as mentioned, on Thursdays, where each participant is addressed on the record in front of the judge. We have graduations once a participant successfully completes the program. We often do them in person here at the court if the participant's able to make it, which is a lot of fun, as most of our court is virtual, especially as it's weekly, which does make it nice and easy for people to log on. But if they're able to come in person, we really value that time. We got to congratulate them and wish them all the best in the future. And we do celebrate just one participant at a time, which helps, we've found, really make sure that we're focusing on individual successes. So that's kind of just what the community court looks like from our office's standpoint. But is there any questions based on that?
I don't think so, but thank you.
Perfect. Turn it over to the next.
Public Defense Services? At least that's the next slide.
So, Sean McCulley, I own Valley Defenders, and I've been your public defender since 2005 or 6, I believe. It's changed a lot over the years. It used to be once a week I'd come here, and I think I charged $3,500 or something a month. It was very different than what it is now. We also used to see a high number of very simple cases out of this court: driving while license suspended, third degree, possession of marijuana, very simple cases that don't take a lot of attorney time. What we've seen as a change over the years is filing decisions by our King County prosecutor to not prosecute crimes has put that burden on the local jurisdiction. So Ms. Moberly was touching upon the fact that we're doing a lot of felonies now. It's not filed as a felony, but I've seen drive-by shootings, strangulations, gun cases. I remember one theft we did was $10,000 worth of alcohol. So what is this doing? So public defenders, the more complex of a case that you have, it takes a lot more attorney time. And we're seeing that the types of cases are changing to where it's becoming a very intensive sort of caseload. I provide roughly 2.5 FTE attorneys, that'd be for North Bend, Issaquah. And then we account for Snoqualmie as well. And, that's increased over the years. But we're finding that we represent in a lot of different jurisdictions. I represent from everywhere from Woodinville to Puyallup to Yakima to Renton, Snoqualmie, North Bend, you name it. And we have 13 attorneys, and I see different trends in different courts and what's going on. And this court is one of the more enjoyable courts to be in. My attorneys fight to be able to be assigned to this court. Then that's a testament to the prosecutors, the staff, the judge. It's also a very intensive court in terms of my staff just doesn't get lunch. And we work all day. And one of the nice things that I've seen in terms of a change has been, it was kind of forced upon us in COVID, but we went to these hybrid calendars where people could appear on Zoom. My initial concern was, wow, this is going to affect my clients, the ones that don't have the ability to figure out Zoom. And I didn't see that. What I did see was some are joining on their telephone, some are having some difficulty and come to my office and join from there. But what I saw is, that single mother who maybe is almost living out of her car, can't afford to take the day off of work, could come up here for court now on her telephone, take a break. So access to justice is a very big issue. And so I really appreciated that change for the court. Some courts are going back to all in person. And I personally think that that's going to have a great impact on those who are in need. Someone like me can afford to go take a day off and go to court, but many of my clients can't. And I have one jurisdiction that's going back in person next week, and the people are freaking out. I can't take that day off. So that's been something that's been really, really helpful here. How has it also changed? Well, we used to have heroin, right? And we would maybe close a file or two a year on someone who dies from heroin. We're having people die every week. It is to the point where we're numb to it now. We don't even cry anymore, hardly. And I know that's sad to say, but we're just numb to it. We had clients from Issaquah here that we were trying to get help for a long time. They left their fentanyl on the nightstand and their kid got into it and died. Now they're going to prison. This fentanyl is crazy. It is really, really challenging. When the judges are saying, well, we need this accountability, we need tests, we need to be able to nip this in the bud and try to save our kids. It's killing our kids, the young people. We need those tools, And I'm a defense attorney. You might be thinking, well, why would this guy care? Because I care about my clients. What's in their best interest is not necessarily beating their charge. It's them to survive, getting them to go to treatment. And we were always one of the biggest courts about releasing to treatment. I think we did more than anyone before Obamacare. And I was very proud of that. And we had a lot of successes with doing that. We need to keep doing it. But this is an intensive court for us. We're seeing big changes in public defense that I've never seen before. When COVID hit, for some reason, nobody wants to be public defender anymore. And this used to be a very challenging to come and get a public defense contract in jurisdiction. And now I'm getting cities that call me, the week before December, begging us to do their public defense next year. They don't have anyone. We had a client who sat in Island County for 4 months waiting to get a public defender. So it's really changed a lot. So the Supreme Court asked, the Bar Association to take a look at the public defense standards, sort of the general rules we live by, and see if there's changes that can be made there that might prompt more public defenders to come in. Because really, the reality is you're just going to dismiss cases if you don't have public defenders. And many jurisdictions do that. They made some recommendations and they adopted some new standards that are going to potentially be phased in. It remains to be seen what's going to happen with respect to the Supreme Court. But essentially, here's what it means to you, and bottom line, and to me. Right now, my attorneys can handle 300 cases a year. You potentially could go to 400 if you had a high number of simple, easy cases like it was in the old days. But 300 is really the standard for here. So I must provide 3 or so attorneys for this jurisdiction. But the per hour caseload, my Issaquah attorneys are in court more than any other jurisdiction because we do try to make a change, because we do order treatment and we do try to have people be accountable. But it also is a cost on us. It's a very demanding jurisdiction in terms of the amount of time. Some jurisdictions just don't care. They'll only make people who get DUI go through treatment. That's it. 80 to 90% of our cases are related to alcohol and drugs in some way, but yet they're not addressed in other jurisdictions. And I guess that's what they choose. I'm glad that Issaquah has always chose sort of a different route. But these new public defense standards, so they're going to get phased in if they're adopted, and we'll see what's going to happen here coming up. We're going to see 120 cases a year be the maximum. Now, the theory and the thought behind this is that public defenders are overworked, and people don't want to be public defenders because they're overworked. They got too many cases. And so we're going to lower the amount of total cases at a time where we're in a critical shortage of public defenders. So what all this is going to mean for us is while I provide 2.5, 3 attorneys for this contract, I need 9. And that costs money. And so right now, I negotiate and do all the contracts in the firm, and I know what all the different jurisdictions do. But right now, Issaquah is probably my most difficult contract to make money on. And I think I'm just probably breaking even, if anything, right now. And we've signed a 1-year contract extension, and we're going to try to work it out. But the reality is coming up in the future, starting next year, I have to pay people. In the last 3 years, we've had 15% inflation, right? But in the attorney world, in the last 3 years, I now pay someone 25% more as a starting rate. And I won't get them otherwise. If you go to the Washington Defenders Association, which is all the public defenders, you look at the job posting from every single jurisdiction is begging for public defenders. They're offering $5,000 bonuses, moving fees, and I have to try and offer a salary that's commensurate with the other jurisdictions. It's very, very difficult. And it's very, very competitive. And I don't know how much longer we can do it at sort of a bargain basement rates. It becomes something that just is very, very difficult to do. And this has been my favorite jurisdiction and contract for a long, long time. But the realities of running a business are we just can get paid a fairer amount in other jurisdictions sometimes. So we've really enjoyed this contract. We really would love to be your public defender in the future. But these big changes are coming. And whether or not they adopt the 120 caseload, you think about that, 300 caseload down to 120. You need essentially 2 additional attorneys to cover what one of my attorneys is covering right now. And that's just something that is difficult to afford. So those changes are coming. I don't know if I prompted any questions. Let me see if I even hit on half this stuff.
Yes,
No contract.
Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean McCauley, it's very nice to see you.
Been a long time, sir.
I appreciate all the work you've done in this court, and I know that you're highly respected in the defense bar because of all the work you've been doing. Could you comment on the March 24th rule a little bit? The budget recommendation is talking about an annual increase between $50,000 and $250,000, and you talked about how they're stepping up over the years. Do you kind of give us a year-by-year increase as the rule is contemplated right now? We're not holding you to those numbers at all, but
I think the first year is a 250 it's going to. It's a phase-in approach starting in, yeah, 2025 goes to, yeah.
Yep.
Right. But in many jurisdictions, Issaquah included, our contracts were specifying we're following Bar Association standard.
sure.
And so we stopped that last year, but
Yeah, just from a budgetary point of view, I'm just trying to get a hold of what years we would need to see what increases so that we're
Yeah.
competitive and in compliance with the rule. If you can give us that information, maybe not right now by number, but if you could come back and maybe give that to our city administrator when
Yeah.
that's there, it gives us a better guidance piece for our budgeting.
yeah,
Speaking of our city administrator, am I getting the sense that you want to comment on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Joe. Again, and certainly appreciate all your comments. We just want to give you a sense of the work and the issues surrounding it. We're not really here to negotiate a new contract this evening. The administration's intent by having this discussion tonight is, to move forward with budgeting appropriately to cover these challenges. So you have that commitment from us, absent any other direction.
No, I appreciate that, and I was just not trying to negotiate in public, but trying to just get an idea of what the rule is requiring and where we needed to be. I hope that Issaquah would be at the forefront of making those changes because we've been a leader in the court system throughout the years that our municipal court has been in existence. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping pace.
And that's why we're here this evening, is that when you add up all the various numbers that you're hearing tonight, the number is substantial.
Yes.
And we do not see our revenues increasing at that level to cover this without other changes. And so the big deal coming into 25, 26, that's why we appreciate everyone's time this evening, and we're taking time and going through this in great detail because it's going to be a major part of the City Council's 25, 26 budget deliberations in a way that it has not been in a very long time.
Yeah, and thanks to the administration for bringing this to us and making sure that we're aware of it. We appreciate your foresight and future vision for this subject. Thank you.
Deputy Council President DiMichele.
Yeah, just following up on Councilmember Joe's comments, I had a similar concern, or not a concern, question, I guess, about how this would be phased in 25, 26, and then 27, 28, which I realize is a different council, but it would be nice when we get the next presentation to kind of see how the administration is thinking about phasing that in, if that's what's happening over time. And that was, just from the materials we had here, that wasn't clear to me how that was going to happen.
yeah. I mean, so starting in 2025, we're going to go from 300 cases to 250, and then it drops down to something else after that. But I know the final number is 120 in 2027. There's a 3-year phase-in if they adopt them as is. We know the Supreme Court wants to lower the case numbers because they're the one who asked them to look at it and make new recommendations. You just don't know if they're going to come out and just adopt them wholesale. But that's where we're looking at additional attorney needed in 2025. You'd probably be looking at 2 or 3 needed in 2026. We'd probably need a total of 8 to 9 in 2027.
And there still is discussion, as he's mentioned, that these have not been approved. And the Association for Washington Cities, the Washington City Attorneys Association, a number of parties, City of Kent, for example, has been very vocal in gathering up support of other King County cities to, have the Supreme Court have at least some broader look at all of these issues. So what you will see from us in the budget will be the best information that we have come fall. Here it is, late May. We just want to present the issues for you tonight, but it's our commitment, the administration's commitment, to make sure that sufficient resources are allocated. The challenge is going to be what municipal services do we not do, perhaps 25, 26, in order to fund these changes.
One nice big change, one nice thing that we did in this jurisdiction, which I think saves this jurisdiction a lot of money, we hired a bilingual attorney. We have Monica Ontiveros, who's a native Spanish-speaking attorney who can directly talk to clients. We don't ask for interpreter services because we don't need it. That's a huge savings from other contracts, other even previous public defenders who ask the court to approve expensive interpreter services to be able to talk to your client. And, Spanish makes up 80+% of your clientele that does speak some other language. So, so that's been a real big help to this jurisdiction. I know that we'll have interpreter calendars that flow a lot easier and smoother because we have Spanish-speaking staff as well. So that's one nice perk that we've been able to provide. And so we always enjoy doing that. And we think that having an attorney who can talk to the client in their language is very valuable.
Thank you. Do you have more material to present this evening?
I don't. No.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Back to Judge Stewart.
I don't have a whole bunch more to present. One thing that I would just follow up on Lynn, one of the things that caught me off guard, she was talking about the felonies, and so did Mr. McCauley. One of the things that has started to get filed, which I think is the most obvious felony, because the difference between a theft 2 and a theft 3 is something we toss around, our TMVs, taking motor vehicles. We're getting car thefts now on a regularly frequent basis filed into our court. And that's increased some of the complexity and such. The last thing, Mr. Joe, Councilmember Joe, I'm sorry. I'm guessing that your city administrator has this, but if I have the timeline for the public defense standards I can forward to you guys. It's certainly something in my association. We're not allowed to get involved in it, but it's something that we're aware of. Though I think Benton County is the one we hear about the most. I think Benton County has, I may get this wrong, but it's something it's on our listserv all the time, that they have 88 attorneys in Benton County, but if the public defense standards pass as set, they'll need 89 new public defenders. And Mr. McCauley's correct, every public defender agency out there can't find attorneys now. So we don't know where those additional bodies could be. And the last thing I wanted to mention, as I sat down, Councilmember DiMichele, you were asking for some other things we could do with regard to the testing. We don't have it on our budget request this year because we weren't prepared and we don't know how we'd handle it. But one of the things you could look towards in the future is the possibility that we might come to you asking for you to fund SCRAM devices. That was mentioned by some of the attorneys. To the extent that we can get SCRAM devices that are run by the court on folks' ankles, we can take them out of our urine testing and reserve that for fentanyl and do a better job of monitoring the folks on alcohol, which is the DUI guys and stuff like that. But I think that's, unless you folks have other questions.
I think Councilmember Joe has another question.
Thank you, Judge Stewart, for coming back up to sew things up. I just had a request that I had in mind as we are looking at our facilities right now and possibly moving the court so that we can perhaps do a new fire station here. The court potentially would be moving over to the King County District Court. I was wondering if, not right now, but if you could perhaps give us some of the financial impacts to that and or case service impacts or client service impacts to that so that we're aware of those factors when we're making the decision to move over to King County Court. I'm sure the administration has probably already been working with you on that, but it's just a request from this committee.
Talk to Christy and we can try to come up with some numbers.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Are these last slides yours?
And we do have the tours scheduled, and so there'll be a discussion during those tours, June 10th. We'll look through the existing facilities, and then on July 15th will be the tour of the district court facility. So the last slides that are here, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we again will be talking at the next item about safety cameras. Looking at a $300,000 plus or minus cost at this juncture as we're doing budgeting. And so as we, as the administration are in the first steps of this, this is the number one item on the list, to make sure that the staffing requests that the court is requesting, and then as we negotiate contracts with the public defender and the city prosecutor, that those are commensurate with the conditions that you've heard this evening. So that is our plan, unless directed otherwise or encouraged otherwise. But part of the reason we're here this evening is to give you this heads up that from Mayor Pauly's perspective, these are serious, important issues. They're very different than what we have talked about in recent years with the budget. So this is a layer above and beyond that. And I think that pretty much takes us to the end of the presentation.
You got a couple more slides.
If there's, excuse me?
You have a couple more slides.
There's a couple more slides. As we always say, 2 or 3 times at the end with the same thing. You know, our recommendation again is receive the report, provide any feedback you have, and we'll be back to talk about the budget in more detail at the council's retreat in late July. And I'd like to thank all the folks who came out tonight. As you heard, they were very busy people, and so to take a couple of hours out of their evening on a Tuesday night is quite a lot. So thank you to all of you who came, and we're certainly, everyone's available for any final.
Those of you worried about lunches, we're trying to adjust calendars so we can get lunches again, although I did not get a lunch today, so we're working on it.
All right. Thank you very much, Judge Stewart. So before we go into a discussion amongst the three of us, I will ask the clerk whether there's been any change. Obviously, everybody in the room is associated with the city, but if there's any indication that anybody who's online might be interested in commenting before this body reviews the direction needed.
Sure, we continue to have one member of the public with us virtually, so I'm going to give that individual just a moment to press *3 to raise their hand or to select the small raise hand icon in WebEx. And I'm not seeing a desire to speak from that person.
All right, thank you very much. And with that, we discuss direction on further information or analysis needed. So what further information and analysis do we believe the administration should provide to the full council as part of the 2025-2026 biennial budget? Councilmember Joe, your finger is poised on the microphone. You look ready to give a comment.
It is, thank you. And first off, I'd like to thank the administration for bringing this to our attention and giving us such a thorough report. Also to fellow members of the bar and prosecutors and public defenders that are here tonight. The job is not easy, as many of you may know. I was a prosecutor for a few cities for about 10 years, and it's not an easy job at all. That's the easy job, though, compared to the work that the public defenders do in some ways. They have the harder task. From my point of view, I would like to see some information on compensation over the years. It doesn't have to be every year from the time that Lynn Moberly started with us, but just the highlights of when they were last bumped up, if at all, over time. And I know that just the year and the bump that occurred so that we can see if we've done anything in the past, and if so, what, over time, to give us an idea of kind of where we are. Really appreciate the comparables that are here in terms of what other cities are paying the public defenders and the prosecutor's office. It's valuable information. And I think that one thing that we heard over and over tonight that I'd like to emphasize is that I was on council when we put the court together, and one of the reasons we did this project to start our own court was the King County court system, while it has its benefits and advantages, did not give our citizens the care and the extra oversight that I think our citizens deserve. And I think you've heard over and over tonight from the parties that have talked that our court, because we're a special place where people care, that starts with the judge, goes down to the prosecutor, the public defender. They care not only about getting guilty pleas or getting wins in trials, but also helping the defender get their life straight, helping the victim find the best avenue to the next step in their life along the way. And that's something that we don't always see in courts, and that's something that we don't often see from other prosecutors' offices and public defenders in the different courts in the system. So as we look at these numbers, I know that they are big and they can seem daunting, but the increases that are being asked, we need to consider in the context of the fact that this court provides fantastic service. We're able to do a high level of prosecution, a high level of public defender care, and then the follow-up services that are so necessary in terms of having probation right here, having the ability to do the drug test to keep the defendants accountable. When I was a prosecutor, we were in the King County court system in one of my contracts, and my city didn't contract with the court for probation services. So I could do anything I wanted with my sentence and order UAs and do the follow-up reviews that are on there, but there was no probation officer that was going to take that next step to monitor the person. And that was just detrimental to the ability to handle a case and see it through and follow through with it. We're so fortunate to have the services of the probation department right here. I hope that as we think about moving the court to the King County District Court or moving it to its new home once we figure out our facilities, that we keep that cohesiveness and the ability to make sure that everyone is working together because they're working so closely in proximity to each other as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Council President DeMichelle.
Councilmember Joe said a lot of what I wanted to say as well, and so I +1 everything that he said. First of all, just looking at all of you, I just want to say thank you so much for what you do. I am so proud of you. I brag about you all the time and tell people what a great court system we have and how dedicated you are to the needs of both the defenders and the victims in our community. So thank you for everything you do. It was a real honor to be able to go to community court, even though it was on Zoom, and see the graduation. So when I ran for council, I had wise advice from a person who said public safety is the #1 responsibility of any council. And I've thought about that many, many times. I know during COVID, we had to look at a big increase in our policing. And we had the issue of making sure that we recruited enough police officers. That meant that we had to increase the offers that we were making to them. We have, for many years, been able to get a really good deal. As Lynn Moberly said, we've had a really good deal here for a while. Now we need to step up and take a review and really, and it's not, just as employers, it's not fair to our employees or our contractors. Be asking them to do these great big jobs for little, very little. If you're just breaking even, that's really not, that's not an ideal situation for any contractor. So I fully support going further, getting more information, but in terms of making the case, as Judge Stewart said, you're making the case tonight. I think you made the case in spades that something needs to be done and that we need to support increased budget for the court and the criminal justice services. I don't have anything else to say, but I think this is going to be a journey that we're on as we go through the budget season, but there can't be anything more important that we do than support our police officers and our courts. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Council President. So it's probably third. Number one is that the toilets flush when you flush the toilet. Number two is the water comes out of the tap. But number three is public safety. And Issaquah is incredibly lucky, probably unique, maybe, Redmond, in King County, in having our own dispatch and our own police and our own court and our own jail, right? And this affords us the opportunity to come up with smart and force multiplier programs to take advantage that we hold all of these elements of public safety in our own hands, right? I think that this budget conversation is an opportunity to really prove to the public that we are doing everything we can to reduce crime, particularly violent crime. And so I think that as we talk about the funds that we need to do various things, I think we should, we should talk about that the community court is a net benefit and that it is financially beneficial versus not having it. I think we should talk about, are there things that we can do to drive down the DUI and domestic violence numbers? We have a great police department. We had a great police department in 2018. And so if those numbers are up quite a bit, I don't think that's, and the chief can tell me if I'm wrong, that's not just from having more officers available. That's something, and we should figure out what that something is, and we should figure out if there's something that we can do policy-wise to help bring those numbers down. My vision is that, Issaquah be a bad place to do crimes. This should not be a town that people come to and think this is a smorgasbord. And I speak as someone whose house was burglarized 10 years ago. It was one of the 5 most traumatic events in my life and has changed my view on public safety. We should not be a smorgasbord for anybody to come do property crime amongst, much less violent crime, which is even a larger concern for the public. So as part of this process, if there are things that we can do as a council, policy that we can do, yes, we want to have restorative justice, and yes, we want to be compassionate, but we have these tools in our kit: dispatch, police, court, and jail. We must use them all to the best ability that we can to help address this concern that continues to grow in the public across the country, but in particular in King County and in our part of King County, of the continuing growth of property crime and violent crime. So I'm excited about this conversation. Yes, it will be more money, but it is also an opportunity to address something and speak to the public about this issue that they consider so incredibly important. And so that's my thoughts. Any additional thoughts? Second round, anybody? No? City Administrator, do you have the feedback you were looking for from the 3 of us this evening?
Yes, I do. And I also just want to mention the one person who hasn't been mentioned in the room, and that's Rachel Turpin, the city attorney. Since Rachel has become our city attorney, she's been very involved in all the issues you've heard tonight and has been a great advisor and counselor to the administration as we deal with this. Rachel's a former prosecutor herself, has lots of good experience and has helped with sort of the management pieces of all of this. So I want to thank Rachel for her help and for being here this evening.
And I want to echo thanking everybody who joined us this evening. This is my 15th year, and I keep learning new things, Judge Stewart. Every time you come in, I learn something that I didn't know before you got here. And I'm sure that if I'm lucky enough to do this for a while longer, that will continue to hold true. So thank you and everybody who joined us this evening for this conversation. But the evening is not over.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a recess till
A
8:30?
recess, yes. Let us take a 5 to 7 minute recess, and we will come back in a bit. I think we're about ready to get restarted. So let's get restarted. Next issue up is COM 00. Oh, excellent. Let's get restarted. Our next issue is COM 0042, Traffic Safety Camera Update, with Chief Schwan from the IPD, Travis Neese, Patrol Commander, and Paul Fairbanks, maybe no? Just the chief. All right, we don't need all those extra people.
While Chief Schwan's coming up, let me just do a brief kind of 100,000-foot overview. We've not talked about traffic safety cameras in a while. The city currently has a school safety zone camera. I, as your city administrator, have been extraordinarily reluctant to bring the issues of additional cameras to you. However, based on what you've just heard this evening and knowing what our budget is looking like, and a very persuasive court administrator who asked me very vigorously to reconsider my position, we are here tonight to give you an update on some of the work we've done this spring and get some general direction for you as we move toward the budget process. Chief Schwan is here, and we'll let her take it away.
Thank you, council members and City Administrator Wallowitz. So the purpose we're here today is to provide information upon the updated traffic study and concerns across the city. This isn't for financial gain only, it's for the safety of our city. And I have a lot of experience with these, not only in working in the city of Issaquah, but also in my prior cities. Whereas we had red light cameras, multiple ones, and I wrote in 1 year over 13,000 red light camera infraction tickets. So something is to obtain direction in the administration's plan for traffic camera use and mitigation of traffic safety concerns. So that's the purpose of us being here tonight. The direction we're needing from the council is the administration is seeking direction to the next steps related to exploration, evaluation, and implementation of additional traffic safety cameras in known dangerous driving areas throughout the city of Issaquah. So we've done some studies, as you're going to see in the future slides, and I think they've presented to you as well with information about these. And specifically, we want to know, should the administration move forward in further investigating on additional school safety zone camera on Newport Way Northwest specifically, and or should the administration move forward with a traffic camera vendor evaluation and pilot program to design for red light photo enforcement cameras themselves in 3 different locations and a possibility of a 4th to consider as well. So a little background in traffic safety. 810 people died in Washington roads in 2023, the highest number since 1990. Traffic collisions in Issaquah are on the rise after dipping significantly in 2020, which was obviously our COVID impact year. From 23 of January to March of 24, 316 vehicle-involved reported collisions, I should say, happened in Issaquah, because ultimately there's many collisions that happen, fender benders, that we aren't aware of and that don't always get reported to the police, or they do an online report directly to Washington State Patrol. 86 of those reported collisions occurred at intersections, and the utility box in the Highlands was hit twice in short succession during one of those collisions. So as far as accounting for those numbers. Other dangerous driving behaviors that are on the rise are DUIs, as been mentioned in the previous presentation, 133% since 2019, 70 in 2023. I will address that only because it's been brought up a couple times. I do think it's because, number one, an increase in the number of officers that are on patrol, and it has been mentioned also that sometimes what has happened in the past when we had lower staffing, the DUIs were still happening, but when we would get them because of the staffing, and that takes an officer off the street for multiple hours, we would call either another jurisdiction, state patrol, who would file them that actually then wouldn't be filed in our courts, but they would be filed in district courts. So some of our numbers are going to be a little off and increased because of that. Also, some of the officers that we've recently hired are laterals, and they are very busy and really enjoy looking and patrolling and enforcing those DUIs, and are very good at what they do. And so that's another reason for some of that increase. And in teaching our younger officers how to do those, because it's a long process, that's another reason that will be an increase. Background as far as photo enforcement, this was provided to you for the difference and how they read the zones as far as when a speed camera, for example, it shows here what that looks like and how it reads in the zone when it gets there. I heard Barbara Day Michelle comment about possibly being Second Avenue and having some understanding of those cameras. The red light camera, I can be very specific on that. A lot of people don't understand that stop line when you come to a red light camera. Both axles must be behind the stop line at the time, and you have to come to a complete stop. Where just because you feel like your body's not in motion, if your car does not come to a complete stop behind that stop line, or it straddles your front axles in front and the other ones behind, then it's considered you violated that. And so you've gone into that pedestrian area, which then in fact makes that you've bridged it and that you are now committed to that violation, and it will get that camera, will catch you. And so that's the biggest part. Or if you're all the way into the intersection and the light is red, then that also becomes that violation because you've crossed that perimeter. And if you're in there, you may as well continue, whereas you've seen some that'll cross the line waiting for the light to turn and they don't make that left turn or don't make that right turn. They're in the intersection, you've already crossed that line. So those are some of those pieces. Next slide, please. Another background as far as photo enforcement, you can see here, city adopted the IMC 1042 in 2008, authorizing automatic traffic enforcement as a whole. And City of Issaquah currently operates one school safety camera on 2nd Ave near Issaquah Middle and high schools. As you can see from 2015 all the way to 23, it's been a large increase, gradual every year. Not only in the number of violations, but also in the number of the income or revenue that has come in from those. Now, one might think that maybe it's a possibility that's because it's not working, but I would argue the fact that majority of these typically are ones trying to avoid traffic, especially on this 2nd Ave, and that it would be people that are more often than not, because I've traveled through there every day when I come into work. And every day you can tell the people who know the camera's going to be there and they slow down, and you can tell those that don't have no idea and then they get caught. So I think that's a big number that you can see as far as those increases. And
Chief, I have a question. I'm
Yes.
sorry. From 2021 to 2022 to 2023, we see a continued increase in the number of tickets issued, but revenues go down each of those years. How come?
I can't speculate. If I had to speculate, I think there would be two reasons for that. One, more people are fighting them as far as the tickets themselves, and asking them to be mitigated in court and giving different reasons or circumstances for those, and they would be brought to court. I think the courts could maybe address those even a little better and have that information. But I think another reason might be is because what has happened with the ability to report those to the state and not re-register your license, or people are just not choosing to pay them. That is another reason that can happen, is that people will choose not to make those payments, and certain jurisdictions, as if within the new code that's coming through and new legislation, is whether or not certain jurisdictions are able to send that to Department of Licensing and put a hold on your registration in the event that you didn't pay your parking tickets or your speed zone violations or red light cameras. So I would say that would be those other reasons why and those numbers would go down as far as revenue, but they would go up as far as the numbers that were issued.
Thank you.
Next slide. Here's the analysis as far as the pictures go. One speed zone, and the second image that's captured, it shows you both. There's two images that are captured typically when you go through a red light. And as far as also goes, the different ones and the different areas at the beginning when you enter the zone and then when you after, as far as the speed zone cameras. The analysis that was done in the certain intersections, they took all this data and the top 10 intersections by number of reported collisions in the city of Issaquah between January 1st of 23 and March of 24. And then they put them based on the highest number of those collisions by those intersections. Eastlake Sammamish Parkway Southeast and Eastlake Issaquah Falls City Road had 11 number of collisions. 17th Ave Northwest and Northwest Gilman Boulevard had 10. Eastlake Sammamish Parkway Southeast, and so on down the line. You can see those different jurisdictions. Does anybody have questions about that analysis or those actual numbers? Okay. As far as analysis on the red light photo, they've designated these three were the top, and they also were ones picked are selected because they don't have a dual jurisdiction, like both parts or all parts of the intersection are in our city. And so it's not shared by either King County or another area. And so we wanted to make sure that's another thing that was addressed. So East Lake Sammamish Parkway and Southeast Falls City Road, 36 traffic infraction tickets, 1 criminal traffic infraction ticket, 14 total accidents with 11 collisions. 50% of the accidents were turning left onto Issaquah Falls City Road. So that would be the direction specifically. In these circumstances, you can choose when you get red light enforcement, whether it's every direction, it's one direction, it's only going northbound versus southbound. And so those are things that you can implement where it doesn't have to be every single direction at an intersection that someone's going to have enforcement on if you chose to put a red light enforcement in them. East Lake Sammamish Parkway at Southeast between 56th Street and Black Nugget Road, 17 traffic infraction tickets, 2 criminal traffic infraction tickets, and 8 total accidents happened at that intersection. Specifically on Highlands Drive Northeast and Northeast Park Drive on Northeast Federal Drive, 10 traffic infraction tickets, 12 total collisions, and 50% of accidents involved a driver running a red light. So half those collisions being someone that ran a red light, which this would hopefully deter those collisions altogether by having that camera there. I think one other intersection that we see that's really close to home is on 2nd and Sunset. It's down here there weren't necessarily collisions, but we have several people that complain about downtown area, the inability to cross that intersection and feel unsafe because they're going northbound on 2nd onto Sunset, turning towards the freeway. That's where everybody's trying to bypass, go up 2nd. Also, kids leaving the high school, quite frankly, because they have an open campus and they rush up to go to Starbucks at lunchtime and then they come back. And so that's another intersection that we see very regularly that there are people running that light. Analysis on the school zone safety. Newport Way Northwest, Issaquah Elementary School. It's a long, straight stretch of road. If any of you have traveled down there, you know as well as I do that that's a long stretch and people are like, oh, I see kids out in the playground or I don't see kids out in the playground, so it must not mean that I don't have to drive slow, which is not the case. And a lot of people walk along the pathways there, going to and from. There's also other jurisdiction, the shopping center that's up there. And a lot of different houses developments. And I see a lot of foot traffic that goes along that way, not just the school zone. And so there's a lot of people that also cut through to avoid the downtown traffic and congestion. Average speeds in both directions exceed safety camera threshold regularly. Northwest Tallis Drive at Cougar Mountain Middle School. Main road in and out of Tallis neighborhood, divided road entrance on school and eastbound side.
Chief, I'm sorry, I have a question
No,
for
go
the
ahead.
Deputy Council President.
Thanks. Going back to Newport Way, which, yes, I'm really familiar with that. We have at some future point, we're going to get some roundabouts there, but that intersection where Juniper comes on to Newport Way seems to be a particularly dangerous place where people take a lot of chances to get out there because the traffic's coming both ways, and so you just have a little bit of room. I'm just wondering, have we thought about how this is all going to fit with the roundabouts that are being planned for that street, or is this something that we would do even before those roundabouts go in?
We've had some preliminary, Councilmember Michelle, members of the council. We've had some preliminary discussions with Public Works on that point. We feel comfortable moving forward now prior to the roundabouts being installed, and we'll continue to work with Public Works staff as adjustments.
Okay. All right, thanks. That was just, I try to get out from that intersection myself, and it is a real challenge, especially during times. So,
Sure.
thanks.
I imagine that since this would also be a speed camera, that even though the roundabouts, we would hope that would slow things down a little bit before they even got to that school zone or to those cameras. But that would just be a double emphasis on trying to slow the speeds there around the school, whether it be for Juniper people entering or for people just coming down the roadway there.
And I believe Councilmember Joe has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, thank you for coming tonight to fill us in on this option. I want to know if there was any type of review that was done by Human Eyes before this was sent off to the court for a school zone speed violation? Do we just send every ticket that gets picked up on that scanner right off to the court, or is there a process that the officers take part in before it goes over to the court?
The officers are the ones that they view every single red light camera, they view every single speed violation as well that comes through the systems, whether that be on Second Ave or in any other jurisdiction. There is a new, I informed the city attorney, Rachel, about the new legislation that's coming through that no longer does it have to be a sworn peace officer. There are other people now, which will be more cost effective for us. But there is a possibility that there is other people that still have certain certifications, but they don't have to be a sworn officer now to review some of those. But they do, every single one of them has to be reviewed. And they take about 2 to 3 minutes for every single one to be reviewed, but every single one is looked at. It's not automated that someone's just given a ticket.
Thank you. I appreciate that information. I just want to make sure that the citizens understand that it's just not an automatic robot that is taking the ticket right away, but there are human eyes on it before it goes to the court. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. Northwest Tallis Drive. Oh, sorry. No. Yep. Back, please. The Northwest 12 Drive Cougar Mountain Middle School, main road in and out of Tallis neighborhood, divided road entrance to school and eastbound. On the eastbound side, recent Issaquah School District speed study found that both average speed and 85th percentile speeds dropped following school opening. Average eastbound speed 25.5 miles an hour and average westbound speed was 28.4 miles an hour. Thank you. Next slide. So the proposal is that we have the red light cameras then to schedule Vera Mobility to evaluate 3 priority intersections for the camera installation. We would determine the expected annual revenues and staffing needs from the evaluation. We'd come back to council and update information following the evaluation. As far as the school zone speed cameras, install additional camera near Issaquah Elementary School on Newport Way Northwest. Similar conditions to 2nd Ave Southeast, but more traffic volume. And hold off on 3rd camera, Northwest Tallis Drive, given staff capacity. Excellent, thank you. The analysis of the estimated financial impacts. Cost per camera system is $66,000 annually, which is about $5,500 per month. A red light camera, we need more information on the additional costs and revenues based on the ticket volume. Next step, if recommended, Vera Mobility will do an evaluation of potential intersection to determine estimated expected photo enforcement volume. And then the school zone speed would be 1 FTE per court, 12,000 tickets. Current camera exceeded $1.06 or $0.06 million in 2023 with 11,606 citations. One thing that should also be noted that was inadvertently left off of here is that we would also ask for, there would be increased FTE that would be asked for by the police department because we would need staff that would be reviewing all these from the both cameras that were added that was inadvertently omitted off this slide. So I just want to make sure that's noted because that is something that is definitely another piece to that because that many increased by up to 4 cameras, it would be a drastic amount of time that an officer, as you mentioned, would have to literally evaluate, or person, regardless of it being an officer, would have to increase looking at those cameras. Slide, please. So options on the red light camera is option 1 is, or 0 is maintain status quo. Option 1, maintain current camera level, increase patrol presence at known intersections best we can as our traffic unit continues to increase with the officers. Option 2 is traffic camera evaluation and pilot program design at administration recommended locations. And option 3, traffic camera evaluation and pilot program design at alternative locations. Options for the school safety zone is maintain status quo, camera evaluation for both locations, or camera evaluation at one additional administrative recommended location with the potential for that 3rd location in future years. Recommendation, the administration recommends that the council committee instruct the administration to either move forward with professional vendor assessment of best placed traffic safety cameras for Newport Way Northwest, move forward with professional vendor assessment for best placed traffic safety camera for 3 potential intersections, which East Lake Sammamish Parkway and Southeast Issaquah Falls City Road, East Lake Sammamish Parkway Southeast and either 56th Street or Black Nugget Road, and Highlands Drive Northeast and Northeast Park Drive or Northeast Federal Drive. Timing and next steps. If advised to move forward, the goal of the camera installation would be by late fall of 2024. We would get council committee direction. We would contact the vendor from the current school zone safety camera and get some installation, and then the red light camera program design and camera installation as well. So the direction needed. The administration is seeking direction on next steps related to exploration, evaluation, and implementation of additional traffic safety cameras in known dangerous driving areas throughout the city of Issaquah. Specifically, should the administration move forward in further investigating additional school zone safety camera on Newport Way Northwest, or should the administration move forward with a traffic camera vendor evaluation and pilot program designed for red light photo enforcement cameras? I do also want to note that we've recently had we had a managers meeting today, and our traffic sergeant has increasingly received more complaints about speed and traffic issues that are throughout the city, whether it be in the Highlands, whether it be in downtown, Old Town, and other parts of the city.
Chief, a couple of questions before we get to the deliberation. I want to make sure I understand how the intersection cameras would work. If you are already in Washington State, if you are already in the intersection when it turns red, you should continue forward and clear the intersection, right?
Correct.
Because that's different from, I'm from Minnesota, and I failed my first driver's test because in Minnesota, you have to clear the intersection before it turns red, which I discovered to my great disappointment and my parents' great disappointment. So this system would, it takes a picture when the light turns red, and then some number of seconds after that takes another picture. And if you're behind the line when the light turns red, but then you're ahead of the line at some point after that, that's when you would potentially get a ticket. Is that how that works?
It takes it when the stop line, so the light turns red, and if any part of your car is over that stop line, then that's when it takes the photo, because it takes that there's a violation.
But
so there's a beam that's across there, and that's how it triggers it.
But it's if the front of your car moves through after the light turns red. Right?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understood.
Because if your car is past the stop line where that beam is at, and it's on your tires, it's not on, because it doesn't matter how high your car itself is. Right. It's triggered by your tires themselves. That's why they both need to be behind that stop line, or if you have multiple axles. But at the same, more than two, I mean, then they must all be behind. And then also, they evaluate at the company. They don't automatically check the tickets, but we also check, they came to a stop, and then after they stopped, because it'll take a picture. If you stop and then you take that right turn, it'll send us the picture, but that's why the officer looks at it and says, oh no, they were stopped, they came to a complete stop, and they continue. And then the judge will see it in there, because that's the first thing the judge will ask. Did you review the video? Because quite often, sometimes the people will not even look at the video that they're in court for that ticket. And then when they look at it, everybody gets to view the video that's in court, and they all go, oh yeah, you really, didn't come to a complete stop. And so yes, that's when that light is triggered and when that second picture is taken.
Thank you. The second part of my question is, if we move forward with a pilot program, red light photo enforcement, would that include assessment of before and after accident rates around those intersections?
Sure. Yes,
Okay.
because we've already done a lot of the right? We've already given you a bunch of the anecdotal information as far as those intersections and what collisions and infractions have been happening, or even citations have happened even to present day. And then what would happen is we would also do those afterward, that pilot program, or after a period of time was in place. So then we can bring it back to the council and say, is this good to implement permanently, or should we be done with that pilot program and either look at other intersections or discontinue the process?
Thank you. I will ask if there are any more questions. Yes, Deputy Council President DiMichele.
Thanks. Over the years, I've heard a lot of complaints about the ingress and egress at Grand Ridge Elementary in the Highlands, and that there's speeding going through there. And I just heard parents seem to think that that's a very dangerous has there been any evaluation of putting a speed camera on, is that Park Drive?
I don't know that there's been an evaluation, but we're definitely open to different options. And if we're going to do one survey, it's not that they couldn't come in and do a survey at two different locations, if that's something that
That might be something.
council was wanted to look at.
You might, yeah, we could either talk to the school district or the PTSA there, but I certainly have heard a lot of complaints and worries and concerns about, it's a straight shot, and so a lot of people don't pay attention to the speed there. It might be something worth pursuing just to see if there would be interest in having that happen.
Sure.
So-
I think the only reason that possibly it hasn't is because of the level of traffic, like the volume. But I'll let administration.
Yes, we would just ask that you make that part of the motion.
Oh, okay.
That'd be very helpful.
All right, great, thanks.
Councilmember Joe, do you have another question?
Yes, thank you. Building on Deputy Council President DeMichelle's question about roundabouts, with respect to the stoplights, I'm just wondering if an evaluation is done to make sure that we're not putting a red light camera in an intersection where the signals might be revamped or upgraded or anything like that in advance, so that we're not, putting a camera up and then have to redo it later. I'm sure you're watching out for that, and if you have any comments on that, I'd appreciate it, but just a concern that came to mind.
Sure. Of course. No, we would definitely keep that in mind with the city, because the engineering of that would be a huge part of the implementation of any of those.
Great, thank you very much.
If there's no further questions, then I will ask Clerk Geezer whether there are any members of the public still online and whether we can find out if anybody wishes to make public comment on this item before we deliberate.
We no longer have anyone from the public with us virtually.
Well, that is disappointing. All right. Let's discuss it.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, Chief Schwan, for the presentation. When I heard that this topic was going to be on the agenda, I immediately said, I bet we need cameras on Newport Way. It's really, in my mind at least, because I travel that road practically every day, definitely a safety issue there. We've got lots of young kids that travel back and forth to Issaquah Valley Elementary, and I definitely think that's something that we need to pursue, even though I have had a traffic ticket on Newport Way. So this could be, I could be working against myself here, but I definitely would support us going forward with looking at that. And then the second question, should we look at possible intersections for red light cameras? Yes, I'd like to learn more about that and have that evaluated further. So I would support moving forward with that as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Chief Swan, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to come educate us about this topic. Like Deputy Council President DeMichelle, I travel Newport Way every day, and when there is a police officer sitting by the storage business right there, filling out paperwork, even if they're not doing active speed zone enforcement, it does noticeably slow down the traffic to the limits that are probably there for the 20 miles an hour during the school session. But we can't be there all the time, and our police officers shouldn't be expected to be in one location all the time. They have community caretaking business to take care of and obligations, and we appreciate that active patrol and active way that our officers are visible in the community throughout each day. So in general, I'm in favor of going ahead with a school zone camera on Newport Way, like Deputy Council President DeMichelle. It will probably catch me at some point, but I had kids that went to Issaquah Valley, and they're now going to the high school and middle school, and they're on 2nd Avenue, and I do feel a little safer having my kids walk to school through that area because there is a speed camera there before. And I didn't let my kids walk to school along Newport because of, maybe it was because of their age. They were certainly younger, but the speeds there did cause some concern for me as I was contemplating public safety and the health and safety of my family. So I would be in favor of looking at a camera on Newport Way Northwest. I would like us to study on the second issue, traffic cameras for a red light photo program. I certainly would like us to make sure that we're doing a cost-benefit analysis in terms of the number of accidents that are there. I certainly don't reflect all the red light violations that we have, but the numbers for the accidents are not that high. I'd be interested to see what we're able to kind of ferret out in terms of how many red light violations we estimate based on either a sample size or some type of camera monitoring for a distinct period. I'd be interested to see, an estimate of how much that is going to improve public safety for us in the red light camera intersections that we're considering. Thank you.
Councilmember G. Michelle?
Thank you. This is actually a question for City Administrator Bobkowitz. I know that red light cameras can sometimes be very controversial, and so I'm just wondering, would this require us to do a public hearing? And how would we inform the public that we're considering this?
Thank you, Deputy Council President. Our next step would be, if the committee agrees with the recommendations, is to work with the vendor. I guess, a very standard package of evaluation. Once we have that, we would come back to you with, I think, answers to most all the questions that you've asked this evening. In speaking with the city attorney, she'd indicated that there would need to be a finding by the council that a camera is necessary, and so there's not a specific report or anything like that. There just needs to be a finding. We would provide you additional information beyond what you've seen tonight, but you've kind of gotten the basics of the enforcement information from the police department. So that would come back. As far as public notice, I think we would, when we come back to the committee with the vendor information, we would have information about that. I think, as you all have mentioned, there are some areas here, this will be an inconvenience for some folks. Newport Way, I imagine we'll hear lots of grief initially from that, but we'll come back with a more detailed plan when we come back to the committee, probably in the early fall.
It looks like our city attorney might want to add something to that.
Not really much to add, just that's correct. And it would be kind of like findings that you would adopt in an ordinance that I'm sure you've seen before, findings of fact, but just based on the analysis that staff will provide. So you don't have to go do your own study. We'll provide it for you. And if you agree with it, then you can just adopt it.
Thank you. Did you have a further question? All right. So my thoughts on this, yes, sure. We should do the speed on Newport. This is a problem that's going to go away when we add 3 roundabouts. People won't just, unless they're hot rodding, they're not, those roundabouts are going to solve this problem. But, when I first got on council in January of 2010, we were talking about adding those 3 roundabouts, and they're not there yet. So it's a good stopgap in the in between. I think we should do the red light cameras study pilot program. I think there is some debate the extent to which red light cameras actually reduce accidents. I'm looking at a cross-cut PBS study that was done about 1.5 years ago, analyzing in a number of King County cities, and they said that speed cameras absolutely, but stoplight cameras, the results, the studies are mixed as to the impact, and that's why I asked the question about making sure that we would pay to have some analysis done on the data, such that after some amount of time we have a good idea of whether those have an impact or not on public safety. And then I don't know what to do about this Park Drive question, but let me tell you, Park Drive is, I, as a driver, find Park Drive to be the most speedy section of road in the city. I used to ride a motorcycle full-time, and I routinely would have to pull over by the side of the road because people were tailgating my motorcycle, which is incredibly dangerous. And so I don't know what we want to do with this, but Park Drive, people just go too fast. And the fact that we have a school there makes me think if Park Drive is not part of our initial consideration, it should be part of it should be there somewhere because people are going too fast on that stretch of road. And it's to me, it's even worse than Newport. Newport, yes, people drive too fast, but Park Drive, I don't get it, but we should fix it. So, do you have what you need from us this evening?
Yes, just an affirmative mention from the committee regarding Park Drive. I see 2 nods.
Well, the question would be, what do we want them to do? Because they're saying that right now they want to do 1 for staffing needs.
You're going to do an analysis, further analysis of Talus, and I believe if we could do a similar study of the Park Drive?
We're not recommending Talus at this point. Because we have some good, fresh information, traffic enforcement information there, and we don't believe at this point it warrants it. It may at some point in the future.
Yeah.
But if the council would like us to pursue 2 additional school safety zones at Highlands Elementary School as well as on Newport Way, it would appreciate at least the either consensus of the committee.
I was mishearing what you said. So what you're saying is we would add Park Drive to the Newport Way.
Right, so that we would ask the vendor.
Sorry.
We would also go back to the police department and gather up basically a package of information to come back to the committee in a few months.
Yes, I would like to see that.
Okay.
My vote is yes.
And I would too, but I see Russell furrowing his brow.
And just so I'm clear, that would be a limited study on Park Drive between Central Park Lane northeast and the area that is down the hill from the school zone where it ends. It wouldn't be the whole length of Park Drive. Is that correct?
I don't think legally we could do that. So
Okay.
I think we would look at whatever the lawful zone is and
Okay.
then have the vendor make a recommendation as to the placement of the.
All right, under those limited circumstances, I would support adding Park Drive to the study.
Sounds like you have the consensus from the council,
Thank you very much.
or from the committee, I should say. Chief, thank you for presenting this evening on this. Always great hearing from you on this and any public safety issues. City Administrator, anything else for us this evening? All right. Any final closing comments?
Great meeting.
All right. With that, we are adjourned.